Hello, I'm Brian Tracy, and let me tell you about the 3 top self-development books that have had such a great impact on me. The first one, which I stumbled across many, many years ago, was called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, Napoleon Hill was a journalist and a writer, and he was called in to visit with Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest, most successful business magnates in the world at that time. And Andrew Carnegie invited him in for this interview, and he wasn't sure what it was about. And then Carnegie said, I want you to help me to develop a philosophy of success. I will open the doors to the 500 richest people in America so that you can interview them as many times as you need to, then take all the best information from these 500 people and put it into a series of books to help other young people to be successful much faster. And he said, but the challenge is this. He said, I'm not going to pay you a penny. I'll open all the doors so that you can get all the information and interview all these top people, but I won't pay you a penny. What do you say? And Napoleon Hill had thought this man was going to hire him and pay him an enormous amount of money to do this writing. He was shocked. And he sat there. He tells about it later. He sat there and he thought and he thought and he finally said, okay, I'll do it. And then Andrew Carnegie pulled his watch out from under the desk and he said, you had 60 seconds to give me an answer. You made your answer in 46 seconds. He then went on to open the door to every wealthy person in America, people who had started from nothing and become extraordinarily rich. And what Napoleon Hill did is he took over the years and he found that there were 17 principles that wealthy people had, qualities and behaviors. He found that no one started off with these qualities and behaviors, and he found that they were all learnable. So he wrote a 22-volume set of books on success, which nobody would buy. Then he wrote a 1,000-page book on success, which nobody would buy. And then suddenly the Depression hit, and nobody would buy a success book at all. So in 1936, they took a flyer, the publisher, and they published one small 250-page book called Think and Grow Rich, which became the most successful success book in the history of the world. And I read it over and over again, as have many of the wealthiest people in America. So that's my first one. That's where you would start. Now, my second one would be my own book, Maximum Achievement. Napoleon Hill's book was written in the 20s and 30s. My Maximum Achievement was written for the 21st century. And it shows you how to completely change the way you think, how to set goals in every area of your life, how to dramatically take control of your life in every area and eliminate the negative emotions that hold people back. But it also shows you how to form beautiful relationships with the most important people in your life, how to develop high levels of self-esteem and self-confidence all the time, and many other things. This book is based on my lifetime of study, reading hundreds and thousands of books and articles, putting the material together into seminars, and training more than 1 million people in something like 58 countries on these principles, and then writing it into a book. And so Maximum Achievement and Think and Grow Rich are the right hand and the left hand of success. Now, another book that I would recommend that I have always liked is The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. Norman Vincent Peale, I knew him and I worked with him before he died. He was a minister and he came up with some very, very interesting ideas about how the more positive you think, the more energy you have, the more grateful you are for the things in your life, the more things that you will have to be grateful for. Just like I teach and other people teach, you'll attract into your life people and circumstances in harmony with your dominant thoughts. So Norman Vincent Peale's idea, the power of positive thinking, has changed an entire generation. You know, the last few decades in America have been the wealthiest decades of any country in the history of man on earth. And it's because these books and other books like them have cascaded like waves. And the people who read the books in the 50s and 60s and 70s, these people have become the movers and shakers and the wealthiest people in our society. So if you want to be like them, number 1, read Think and Grow Rich. Number 2, read my book, Maximum Achievement. Number 3, read The Power of Positive Thinking. Those books will change your life.
I read a book recently by Seth Godin that really is, it's called Linchpin. And I'm a big fan of Seth. He's a friend of mine. He's very poetic and he's brilliant, and he takes complex things and makes them very simple, but writes them in a very inspiring way. So I'd show you his book right now, but these days I read on my iPad. So I'd really go pick up his book. I think it's really tiny. You can read it really quick, and I think it'd give you some really nice insights. And then one other book I'd just like to recommend to you, if you just have a little bit of time here, is called The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt. And I'm probably mispronouncing his name, I hope I'm not. But it's a book I read when it first came out several years ago, but it's one of the best books I've read to show you the scientific understanding of how you really experience a life of fulfillment. Because as things get more difficult, the old style of being happy that so many people used of, let me just get what I want, we all know that doesn't work. But it becomes more obvious when the economy contracts. And one of my missions is to make sure people are really truly fulfilled in their lives, and that I believe that happens by contribution, by relationships, by making a difference, by having your life have meaning beyond yourself. And yes, you can get your toys, and I've had the privilege of doing that, but it never fills anybody up. This book, rather than me tell you that in a few words or some silly little quote, I think it'll give you some stuff that's real food for thought. It'll move you, and it'll kind of give you a little pathway to see what are the real ways to have lasting happiness and fulfillment. So just thought I'd recommend those two books to you. I hope you find them really useful, and thanks for tuning in to some of the silly quotes and tweets I sent out there. I hope they're inspirational for you. I'm just, at times like this, I'm always looking to help people out. At times like this, when I find other people that have got great messages, I like to pass them on. So take good care, and I hope to meet you sometime soon.
Yeah. What's the best book you would recommend for someone to be more financially intelligent? If there was one book to read to hopefully understand a lot of these principles when they didn't know them?
Well, I think that I haven't read it yet. Everybody's talking really amazing about Tony Robbins'
It's a great book.
New book,
Master
right?
of the Game. Yeah, Money Master of the Game.
Okay,
Yeah.
I haven't read that. And again, dyslexic. So I'm sure you listen to audiobook probably, right? You got to get the audiobook. Of course, Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
I know, no, not Think. Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah. Okay.
Rich Dad Poor Dad. It's a staple for a
Every
reason.
summer, I try to do a little extra reading. Here's a few books I've read recently that you might enjoy. On Immunity by Eula Biss. She explains the history of vaccination, why children who don't get vaccinated can even affect those who are vaccinated. She's a very good writer. I wish I could write as nicely as she writes. Should We Eat Meat by Václav Smil. It's provocative the way he does the title, as though passing the responsibility to the reader, where we know it's pretty hard for people to give up meat. There are books that touch on this topic that don't have numbers in them, but this is Smil. You are going to get the numbers. You might even get a few sentences in between the numbers. How to Lie with Statistics by Daryl Huff. Being able to understand what you're looking at and being willing to say, hey, where did that come from? Is that accurate? It's a quick read. It's got a lot of good examples in it. It's a trip to the past, even though the basic points it makes are still as valid today. What If by Randall Munroe. It's a very clever way of getting you to think about various scientific things going on. This idea of when you say glass half empty, do you mean empty as in perfect vacuum? And all of a sudden, if there was a glass sitting there where you put the water on the top and the vacuum on the bottom and the vacuum on the top and the water on the bottom, this is clever. Those are the kind of questions that somebody with a good mind who's trying to figure out if they really understand, that's the kind of question you should ask yourself. Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Broche. She's pretty creative and humorous about making fun of herself and revealing her inner thoughts. There was one thing about the dog where, this is one that I told Melinda to read, where the dog's getting confused where they're moving. And so she's trying to simulate what the dog's thinking. And her dog, maybe it's true, it's one of the most inept, impossible dogs to ever take care of. And finally, The Magic of Reality by Richard Dawkins. In science, we're all kids. I mean, a good scientist is somebody who's redeveloped the chain of reasoning of why we know what we know from scratch many times just to see where there's holes or alternate possibilities. It can never hurt to reread these things and think through what you're learning. We can observe way more stuff than you'd imagine. And we've made more sense out of the stuff we can observe than you can imagine. So quite a range there in terms of fun to learn, fun to know about. I hope you enjoy them as much as I did.
Books. Books you should see as hidden treasure. Think about it. If I told you, because as I said, mentors are great in person, but some of the great mentors are no longer alive. Shakespeare, Darwin, Freud, Mahatma Gandhi. But if I told you all those people were in my house, they're going to be there this Saturday answering questions, magically I can make that happen. Would you show up at my house? Of course everybody would buy a plane ticket and end up in California. They are there in my house. They're on my library. They can be in your library too. Talking about Sam Walton. This is a man who made $160 billion for himself. More than all the other billionaires basically combined. He wrote a book on his deathbed. How many people have read it? It's a tragedy that not every business person's read a $5 book by a man who built an empire. But it's because the modern education system has turned people off from books. You got to rewire your brain. Let me show you a few quick tricks. First thing is stop seeing a book like a one-time event. See a book like a friend. You read it over and over. You come back, and just like friends, you pick a handful of them. I recommend you find 150 books. There's 130 million. Can't read that many, but 150 you can read over and over for the rest of your life. There's no rule either at how fast you have to read them, at what pace. I set my own pace. People say, how do you read a book a day? Sometimes I take a week. But sometimes books only have one or two things that are worth reading. In fact, most books only have that. So I have flipped through the pages one time. I like to go through 3 times. First time I read the table of contents, the back. The second time, go a little faster. The third time, I just focus on one chapter. See yourself like a gold miner, just looking for that one nugget. Then put it back on the shelf. The average American buys 17 books a year, maybe reads 1 a month. You should read at least 1 book a week. Because remember, everybody wants the good life, but not everybody's willing to read to get it. You must read more.
Read 10 to 15 pages of something positive every day. Why? And read it with conviction and stay focused. 10 to 15 pages every day. This is 7 days a week? Absolutely. Absolutely. Every day. McDonald's know that you know where they are. Burger King know that you know where they are, but every day they have some advertising. They have billboards, they have radio, they have television. Why? Because by exposing you to those messages, that will begin to impact your behavior, and it will drive you into the place to purchase what they're advertising. Now you're advertising for your greatness, and faith comes by hearing and hearing and hearing and hearing. So you want to listen to positive messages every day. You do this, I'm telling you, your life will never be the same again. And read 10 to 15 pages of something positive every day. I read 2 to 3 books a week. Why? Because I have goals and dreams of things I want to achieve. I want my life to count. I want to make a greater impact.